Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back. It is Market Monday. It's that time, same place, same channel, same face, except today we got somebody else in the box. This is Mr. Ben Mitchell, and I mentioned to you guys last week we were going to have a bit of a different series started. We've had some spots on Mondays where we've had the opportunity to get to know somebody around the TRADEway camp a little bit better. I'm here with you guys every Monday doing this Market Monday broadcast, helping you, as I always like to say, get something that's going to help you win. I want you to win. It's not just a catchphrase. It's literally the way I think about it when I say, okay, what are we going to do this Monday? How can I give people out there something of value that they can use? And I think what's been very valuable about having a couple of the people who are on staff, they're traders, they're coaches, they're involved in the process of learning to trade and reaching their own goals is, we've had those people on, and it's been something where people have been able to identify with their stories. And one of the beautiful things, and I know Ben could speak into this, Ben Mitchell, by the way, this is one of the CEO and founder, David Mitchell. This is one of his sons as well. He is the manager of the TRADEway office as well. So Ben is involved in all kinds of stuff. Now, this is a job I used to do. Now, Ben's taken it to new places since I've left, but I know it's a lot. So Ben is a very special guest today. Ben has been a part of this journey that his family has been on. He knows the heart of the family and the journey, of course, but he's also intricately involved in everything going on. So I wanted to bring him on today and just kind of pick his brain, dive into his story a bit, because, one of the things we notice at TRADEway is that we have an amazing team of people put together. We honestly believe God has put this team together so that we can reach as many people as possible with these skill sets. And Ben could attest to this, that we have so many different people on our team because there's so many of you out there, and it's something where you may watch an interview that I do with one person and it may really connect with you, but Ben or somebody else's story is maybe really going to connect with somebody else. So I'm excited, Ben, to have you on here. As always, Ben is an awesome guy, just right down to the ground, but certainly his role at TRADEway is pivotal, and I think he's got some really good stuff for you. I'll save a little bit of the details, but Ben, welcome, man.
Thanks a lot, Blair. Thanks for having me. And it's great to be here, and I appreciate you pointing a few of those things out. I just wanted to say really quickly, since you brought it up, I have some pretty cool roles here at TRADEway that are huge blessings to get to be a part of and be in those certain roles. But like you said, team manager is one of them. I had huge shoes to fill when I stepped into that role. Like you said, everybody, Blair was our team manager for over 3 years, and was an unbelievable leader for all of us to follow. So when I stepped in that role just a little bit over a year ago, which seems crazy, it's flown by.
Yes,
that was a very intimidating aspect of it. But Blair has always been nothing but amazing support for me and just about everybody else here, part of the TRADEway team and the students as well. And so I just want to throw that out there, Blair. Everything you do is much appreciated. But it's great to be here. I'm really excited to be with you guys.
Yeah. Hey, man. And, guys, I want to say too, we're going back and forth, Ben and I, but I tell you all the time, even today, the goal here isn't that we would just talk at you, but we get an opportunity to talk with you. So as we're going through, and if you've been on some of the previous broadcasts, specifically the other interviews that we've done, the questions that you guys can interject as we're going along, that's the biggest part of what we're doing here. So I would just invite you, Troy, I see you there. Jeffrey, I see you there. You can go ahead, drop your comments, no matter what platform you're joining us on today. Go ahead, throw your comments there in the section, fire it on over. If you've got a question for myself as we're going along, for Ben as he's telling a story, then please send that over, because that would be great to have and direct us along the way. So one of the things I mentioned, Ben, that I think a couple things actually, guys. I want to say this. So we mentioned some of Ben's role. I also want to say this today. You know, something that Ben also does, and really, Ben, this is something you started for TRADEway and ultimately for TRADEway students, and that is that TRADEway has a precious metals division to it. We have a whole part of our company that we actually have never talked about here on Market Mondays, where you're specifically looking at precious metals. So I would love to dive into a little bit of that stuff today. I think for you guys out there who know some about precious metals, you're going to find that Ben has a very extensive yet simple way to teach what is beneficial and even maybe crucial about precious metals. But first, I mentioned that obviously Ben is in the family. So Ben, I would love to start today if you would just give us a little bit of what TRADEway, the journey of TRADEway has really meant for you when your family started this thing. Not everybody knows the TRADEway story that well in terms of creating the family legacy and some of the things that your family has at the very center of what this company means to them, because it's not just about going out and making money. We want to help people reach their financial goals. But I've had the opportunity to see some of that. Maybe share a little bit of that today for some of our viewers.
Absolutely, Blair. I mean, obviously, yeah, it's one of the most special parts of TRADEway and working in the day-to-day with the team at this point in life, because I vividly remember the early days. You know, some of you guys may, if you've been on some of our events, whether it be live or virtual, you may have heard Dad or someone, you know, throw out the fact that, you know, TRADEway was actually started in my sister's garage. My dad, my sister Katie, and her husband Dave. Those were the three pivotal players that got us to where we are today. Well, you know, going back to that, when all that was happening, I was still in middle school. And so I have vivid memories of getting picked up from school, our little Christian school in Corsicana, and then going over to Dave and Katie's house, which was one of mine and my little brother Matt's favorite places to be, because they're some of our favorite people. We would just hang out while they finished the day, you know, from 3 to 5. And so literally, you know, have been right there from, you know, the ground up. Now, obviously, it was several more years before I got to start taking part in this. And you know, they progressed, you know, massively in between the time they started in the garage and the time I came on board, which was about 7 years ago this month, actually. And so, you know, over the past, well, I'll say this really quick, Blair, just to address more specifically that last question. You know, it's a really special thing to think back on kind of how we started to get us where we are today, because the heart of TRADEway, the heart of why, you know, David Mitchell started this thing in the first place, is because you know, he had these skill sets that he knew were extremely valuable to him as an individual, and they were passed down to him from his grandfather, and he was fully prepared to pass the skill sets down to his kids, which he did. But, you know, one day, well over a decade ago at this point, you know, just the idea popped in his mind as well as my sister's that, you know, this could work. This could be something that we could potentially build a family business around. But in addition to that, help as many families around the country as possible with these skill sets to provide, as my dad, you know, frequently talks about, that financial freedom to be able to do things independent from, you know, the financial advisors out there or, you know, other people's advice, other people's take on the markets. We wanted to let you guys have the ability to do that. And so that's exactly why TRADEway started. It was merely to, I say merely, I mean, it was a big deal. It was to empower like-minded people how to trade the stocks and options market, like my dad learned how to do. And so fast forward a little bit, we start teaching events. My dad taught all of them for the better part of the first 5 years, I think. Yep. TRADEway was around. We traveled the country and taught everything from our, you know, initial step 1 events all the way through the more advanced events. And I got to be a part of those. I was on the back table as just, again, a middle schooler, junior high, throughout high school, usually doing homework or something in the back while he taught these events. And and so obviously I was exposed to that from an early age as well. And so fast forward to today, here we are. It definitely looks a little bit different. These days, a lot of what we do is more virtual.
I would say so. Yeah.
For good reason. But we still have that opportunity to put ourselves out there and have a platform to talk and engage in some of these incredible things with, again, like-minded Christians, brothers and sisters of Christ across the country, and talk about really, really cool things. And so, yeah, I mean, certainly there's a lot of sentimental aspects to what we do every day here at TRADEway, going all the way back to the beginning. And it's amazing to kind of keep that perspective for us now, just from an internal perspective as a team, because so much has changed and we can see the hand of the Lord throughout every bit of it. And so,
yeah.
I mean, Blair can attest to that. He's been with us for so long.
Yeah. Hey, listen, guys. So a lot of stuff in what Ben is sharing there, I just want to jump on quick as he's saying it here, because, that's perfect, Ben. That's exactly the question I'm asking. The story, guys, I don't, I feel like I hear this sometimes and I'm hesitating a little to say it, but it's true. It's true. Maybe the experience of somebody who's in the family is going to be different. For everybody out there, if you've never been involved with TRADEway, it wasn't that long ago. Ben just mentioned, like, Blair, you've been with us forever. Now it's been just over 5 years, probably, maybe almost 6 years. Okay. But at some point, guys, I was sitting in the chair you're sitting in. You either don't know TRADEway at all, or you've just started an educational journey with TRADEway. So I've been in that space, and I have to say, listening to Ben answer, it's really all true. Like, that's what I would say. It's really all true. The family experience that Ben is describing is something that I know the heart of TRADEway is to continue to carry that for all the people that are involved. I mean, we're not going to go into this today necessarily, Ben, but I mean, we've got programs rolling out this year for kids. I mean, we've even got programs specifically to help teach your kids. Side note, we live in a country where there's a lot of financial illiteracy. Mm-hmm. And even adults are finding, this is certainly my experience, that I needed to go somewhere to really teach me, hey, who are some people that actually have had money that know what to do with it, which is going to take us back to our precious metals talk here in a little bit. But all that to say, guys, it's a whole family thing. And that's really honestly what's at the heart of it. But it's not only for the people who were in the Mitchell family. And I can say that for sure, because I also had experienced that as a student, and certainly being in the community as an employee, as a coach, as a friend. That's just the heart of who they are. And I'm going to even pop this up really quick. Jeffrey just went ahead and threw this in there. Jeffrey's with us every week. The family is so generous, and I can say that. And of course, guys, we're not trying to, lift up people so high, except to say, this is really who they are. This is really who they are. And on our market, or our Wisdom Wednesday last week, we talked about you can't serve both God and money. So if you're going to learn money from somebody, you're going to want to know that their priorities are in the right place. And that's what I love about your story. Troy says 10 years ago, it seems like there was 1.2 million new brokerage accounts opened. I don't know if that's an actual number or not, but we've been talking on here, Ben, about how many new brokerage accounts have been opened this year. It's one of the fastest growing things out there. So that said, Ben, tell us a little bit about this precious metals thing. So part of your journey with TRADEway, obviously you were part of the building of this outreach, this company for folks and families to be able to reach their financial goals through trading in the stock market. But at some point you saw that there were some needs that might be able to be met in a bit of a different way. Tell us a little bit about what that story was for you.
For sure, Blair. And I do appreciate that comment there, Jeffrey, by the way. But so just a little bit of history, not to take up too much time. Going back to about 2013, my dad, again, teaching these events across the country, he saw a need among our students to not only there was something missing within just the overall financial journey, if you will, for lack of a better term. With the stock and option trading education we were doing, the idea was to give people the potential to create new wealth, right? Well, it was around that time of 2013 that my dad realized this need of our students also needing to learn how to protect the wealth that they make. And
interesting. Okay.
That students would frequently ask him, "What do you think about gold and silver? How should we consider working that into our portfolios or even our trading?" And so he came to me one day and he literally said, and I was pretty new to the family business. I started in October of 2013. And so it was about 6 months after I started, he came and said, "Ben, I want a precious metals division, and I want an education based on, based on a biblical foundation, just like the rest of our education was, and grounded in the history of gold and silver and its significance." And so that was a little bit of the history there. So Dad gave me this task. I had no idea where to start. I had a good friend, John Quinn, that some of you guys may know. He's one of our speakers, has been for a long time. He actually gave me some great books to start with because it was a subject he was interested in. So I started from ground zero, quite literally. What's cool about it, Blair, and the reason why I wanted to point out this specific part is because it initially started as a project that my dad asked me to do and that I was going to do for his sake. But it didn't take long to turn into something I became extremely passionate about, because where I started on this journey of creating this precious metals education was with the history of money. It wasn't necessarily the precious metals specifically. It was just the history of money. And the things I started to learn were so fascinating to me, and just the things, the benefits of precious metals investing and what those particular natural elements have had to offer to the human race for all of human history, even going as far back as the Garden of Eden. I was just absolutely captured by its significance, and again, fell in love with it. So it became something I was extremely passionate about, not just a favor I was doing for my dad. So here we are, at this point in time. Yes, we have a full-blown precious metals education. We have several support programs in place for our precious metals students, so that we not only teach you, how, why, when, and even where to buy precious metals, but we support you along the way. And so, Blair, precious metals investing is a very broad thing in general, but it's also a very strange industry because it's an industry that is almost totally unregulated.
I mean, I think we've all seen the crazy advertisements on TV, right? Late night guys saying buy, sell. So hold on, let's pause there for a second.
Yes.
I think because that's great. So there are people out there. Maybe you've done this before, or you haven't done this. All you've seen is these crazy advertisements that are telling you silver is about to go to the moon. Buy now. And you're like, I don't know who I'm buying from. I don't even know why I would buy. I guess if he's right, that seems like a good idea, but I don't know who this person is. And so we do nothing. And that's like we talk about on here, Ben. I mean, that's really a big part of what we do is that we want to know more. But who can we trust, and why do we need to know? So I want to pause you there for a second.
Sure.
You mentioned that you got this task almost, right? It was bestowed upon you, but then it actually you realized just how amazing it is and how important it is. But I think for folks out there, they may not understand yet exactly what grabbed you about that. So tell me, when you're looking at the history of money, what are some of the things that you think today? What do we still believe about money? We believe about currency, the system of money, even maybe, that you realized that's not really the way we think it is. Or what are some of the main discoveries that you made that showed you, actually, I want to know more about this?
So, great question, Blair. And goodness gracious, this could easily be several hour conversation. So I'm going to take myself here.
Just give me the bullet points, man. Give us the goods.
I'm trying to line the bullet points so that I make sure we don't waste too much time. So here, I guess to pin down kind of the thing that was really incredible to me was, well, it's twofold. So first of all, you guys have to understand that the current system that we're using right now, with U.S. dollar, whether you're an American using U.S. dollars, whether you're in Europe using euros, or using Japanese yen in Japan, or whatever it may be, every currency in the world right now is referred to as what's called a fiat currency, which simply means that it's not tied down by an anchor. Okay, it's not backed by anything tangible. Now, most people, like I would say, most people understand, or at least have heard the term fiat currency, and we certainly are all familiar with paper currency in general. We use it all the time, right? The thing that's interesting about it that we have to understand is, in all of human history, there have only been 40 years that fiat currency was a global standard, and we're currently in, a little bit, getting close to the 40th year, I believe, something along those lines. And so, basically, the point in saying that is that we are just now getting to the point of this grand experiment where we may start seeing the kinds of negative effects you wouldn't necessarily want to be seeing when it comes to your hard-earned money. Okay, so fiat currencies, they've been around more than 40 years. They've been around in the early centuries. I believe China was the very first country to ever start printing paper money. The difference is, again, this is the first time over the last 40 years, since 1971, this is the first time that the whole world was using totally paper currency. What's interesting about that note is that in times past, every fiat currency that has ever existed, again, that wasn't backed by anything tangible, that wasn't backed by something that a person could redeem it for, it failed. And so that is what really caught my attention. I'm thinking, okay, so, it totally changed my perception of money. It totally changed my perception of how to save money. Okay, because my dad, I mean, we were taught from a very early age that you save an inheritance not only for your kids but for your children's children. Well, how do you do that with something so fragile, something that could, be something that could fail, is basically what I'm getting at. And so that right there, Blair, realizing that for all of human history, historians, anthropologists, all sorts of groups within, the academic realm have agreed upon a certain criteria that money must meet in order for it to be money. Well, starting in 1970, and those are things like durability, it being elastic, it being something that is easily divisible, a bunch of different things like that. There's 7 specific ones. The current money, the money we're currently using and have been since about 1971, it doesn't meet 3 or 4 of those needed criteria. And so, again, coming back to why we started this entire thing, it was not only to provide an education through stocks and options for our students to potentially create money, but now with the precious metals education being in place, we can teach our students how to protect the money that they make as well.
Right. Okay.
That's kind of the heart behind it.
That's great. Okay. So what I'm hearing, okay, and you can jump in on me at any point.
Sure.
What I'm hearing is we used to have money that we actually, the bills that we had, or the dollars that we possessed, actually derived its value from an actual asset, which that is no longer the case, correct?
That's exactly right. A lot of people are familiar with the phrase gold standard, right? Well, that we were on a gold standard until 1933. And then FDR changed that, but we were still linked to gold in some form or fashion all the way up until 1971. And then Nixon ended that. And so since 1971, what has backed our money? What?
Yes.
Okay. That's the question. What has backed
so let me ask you this question now. And just generally speaking, I know our audience out there could go and just Google this, and maybe you guys should once we're finished here. Generally speaking, if I've got money in the bank that I started saving let's say 2005.
Yeah.
Now, I think a lot of us probably have a general idea of what inflation is, but probably varying degrees. And just so everybody out there knows, before I really started this whole journey, I would have had a general idea, of course, what inflation is, but really understanding what does it mean, how does it work against my money, I wouldn't have been able to go too far with that. So I believe that's probably speaking to a good handful of people who will be listening to this either live right now or by the recording. So if I've got money that I'm saving, I've made this money, this is my money, and it sits in the bank from 05 till 2020, what's actually happened to my money? Let's say if I had 10,000 bucks in there, what's the difference between then and now? I think that's a really important part about what you help our folks understand.
Yeah, Blair. And I'm going to move your timeline up 5 years just because I happen to have those figures in my head.
Okay, all right. Sure, that'll be helpful for people. Yeah.
But it also, in some ways, brings it even closer to home because that's only 10 years. Just in the last 10 years, what does our money look like? Well, in the last 10 years, because of the fact that our money is not anchored by anything, it's not held down. It can be printed basically at will, and there's a lot more to it than that. That's somewhat oversimplified, but it can be printed pretty much at will. In the last 10 years, our cash money that could be in a savings account or whatever it may be. You could even have some cash that you have in a drawer or a coffee can somewhere, that sort of thing.
Right.
Or just savings. Over the last 10 years, it's lost over 20% of its purchasing power. And that's according to government figures. Okay. So
wow.
First of all, that tells you what happens to money that's not tied down to anything, that's not anchored. That's what happens to fiat money. Over time, it loses value gradually. And so if you put X amount of dollars in just a good old savings account 10 years ago for a rainy day or for whatever it may be, saving for your children's inheritance or whatever it may be, you've lost 20% of that money's value since then. So that's the first thing. Second thing to think about is the value of gold has increased by almost 60% in that same amount of time.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And so,
so this is really about where it is smart to hold value over the long term.
Yeah, that kind of brings it back to, okay, why are we even talking about precious metals? And by the way, guys, I'll just throw this out there because sometimes I do this all the time, so I assume you know exactly what I'm talking about. But when I'm talking precious metals here, I am literally talking about physical coins and bars, just like in those commercials that Blair was talking about earlier. Right. The difference is we take a slightly different approach than those commercials you see. You're watching Fox and you see the Rosalind Capital commercial.
Sure, yeah.
Or whatever. That's not how we approach precious metals investing exactly, but it is the same vehicle that we use, those coins, bars, physical gold and silver. And we use it as a way to preserve the purchasing power of your money. So again, 10 years ago, if you had put even just a portion, I'm not necessarily advocating going and putting all your money in gold right now, but even if you put a portion of the money that you put in a standard savings account into gold rather than just the standard savings account, rather than losing 20% of its purchasing power, it actually would have retained its purchasing power. And through this through this neat thing called price appreciation, you would have actually made a little bit as well. And that's beyond the scope of this conversation, but it's certainly an important component of it.
I think that's really important. That when I first heard some of this stuff, guys, a light went off for me. It definitely went on. The light went on for me because the idea that I'm saving, some of you could have a significant amount of money. And that's 10 years. And initially, when I started looking at figures that we're talking about right now, I was looking at 20 years. I couldn't believe how much of that, like Ben says, purchasing power on cash, and I go around and I see, after taking Ben's material and being around him, I see these advertisements from banks for these high interest savings accounts. And they don't even outpace annual inflation. What they're planning to give me in a year for opening an account with them, I will essentially lose that much purchasing power in the same calendar year anyway. But we don't understand how these things work. And so it's like, hey, that could be that sounds like a good thing, right? So thank you for sharing that, Ben. That's very, very interesting. So I want to kind of keep hitting at that, but maybe a little bit different angle. So for folks out there starting to understand, there is actually, let's pause there because I like this question. I'm going to pop this up here, Ben.
Okay.
You can see that there.
Legal to possess a bar of gold. Troy, as of 1974, yes, thanks to Gerald Ford. Can you believe that from 1933 to 1974, U.S. citizens were not allowed by government regulation to own physical gold? It wasn't legal. Now, there were plenty of citizens that still did it, but it wasn't legal to do. But thanks to Gerald Ford, 1974, yes. And that, Troy, is exactly when these kinds of investments that TRADEway talks about now, these coins and bars, that's when the bullion industry started, was around that time. So that's actually a great question, because a lot of people don't even realize the flexibility they have and in their choice, in what they can choose and where they can put their money.
Excellent. No, I love that. That's great. That's great. So, okay. So same thing. I want to hit this from a little bit different angle. So looking at the practicality of precious metals investing to really retain the value and the purchasing power over time. But there's another angle to this, and you talked a little bit about this with the history of money and how, money today, we may not realize other currencies, and you could tell me, Ben, maybe many or most or all currencies that don't meet these requirements over the course of history have eventually failed. Ultimately, what does that mean for us today? What does that mean for our viewers today in terms of, really how vulnerable is our monetary system to any kind of negative effects?
Sure.
And what does that even really mean to you when I say that, vulnerable?
Okay, so first of all, my first thought is that I would 100% agree that it is a vulnerable system and that it is very fragile. I wouldn't disagree with that. But as you guys know, there are a lot of, again, this is kind of where TRADEway is different when it comes to precious metals investing. If you have seen those commercials or have even gone out and just done some research on your options out there, you may have noticed that there are a lot of companies out there that use, while it is a reality, they use it as a benefit to them to, get more sales and things like that. And they use it as a trigger for fear, and often to get you to invest in things that aren't actually in your best interest. Here's the angle that TRADEway takes on precious metals. While what Blair just said is absolutely a reality, again, this is only a 40-year experiment, which is very young. It took 250 years for the Roman currency to totally collapse, and they started debasing that not too long into their own history. And so it can take some time. However, it is a different scenario. That's another different topic. But going back to how TRADEway's approach, we do not want to use fear as the reason or the foundation behind your precious metals investing. We want to use the concept of individual preparedness. So what we do is we say, listen, guys, here's what we know. For the better part of the last 6,000 to 10,000 years of human history, precious metals have been used as a source of protection, financial protection, that all humans in every generation going back that far have agreed is a fact, that they agree that they certainly do meet all of those requirements that real money needs to have in order to actually be money. They agree that there is value in these natural elements that, go figure, the Lord put in the Garden of Eden before we even needed money. And what's funny about it is he actually said the gold in the land of Havilah is good, which if you look in the Hebrew word can be translated as wealth. And that was before Adam and Eve even needed money. So he knew that we would ultimately need it someday, and he created it just for that. And so here's the take. Here's the take that we have here. We don't use fear as the basis for investing. We use the fact that this is a reliable source of preservation. it is tested, time for all of human history, and we take the angle that by doing so, you are setting yourself up to be prepared if the worst happens. We're never gonna put a timeline on it. We're never gonna say you need to buy gold and silver before this date because
before the election,
if you don't, the dollar's gonna collapse. You're never gonna hear us say that. What you're gonna hear us say is that by applying a well-structured, well-calculated system that we have put in place for you to follow, you are prepared for if something does happen out of the ordinary by, I don't know, maybe something like a global pandemic that hit us out of nowhere, or, which by the way, that affected the precious metals market like nothing that the history of precious metals investing has ever seen before.
I'm sure.
And a lot of the students I had pre-pandemic benefited from it, just because they had the education beforehand and had precious metals beforehand. But the point I'm getting at is you are prepared in the case that something crazy does happen. But more importantly, you have a source of savings that, again, has stood the test of time to pass down to the next generation to use for the same purpose. That's something that my family's been doing for over 3 generations now. That's the angle that TRADEway takes when it comes to precious metals investing. It's about being prepared and about providing a reliable source of inheritance for the next generation.
Right. That's so interesting. So we're not talking about, inflating a disaster or, something like that. But there are practical ways that we can do multiple things at one time. Because remember, we didn't just talk about preparation. We talked about buying power. We talked about some of the wisdom. A lot of the students at TRADEway, and Ben knows this, it's this concept of stewardship and understanding stewardship and how can I be a better steward. And I know Ben well enough to know that, he would work with any person to know when is the right time for something like precious metals for that individual. Mm-hmm. But certainly having this knowledge and considering when could be the right time for you is a part of that stewardship. I think that's absolutely true. So, it's funny, Ben, you say, we don't obviously want to say, the money system's going to collapse and we don't believe that, we don't believe that. But I do want to say, it's interesting. You mentioned John Quinn earlier.
Yeah.
And, even when I first moved to Texas, you guys are going to get a chance to meet John Quinn out there, by the way, because I'm going to have him on the show here in a few weeks. So you'll get an opportunity to meet John, who also has a fascinating story, his journey, like mine, as a student with TRADEway. But I moved out to Texas, and John was one of the first guys I met. And, John is an ex-military guy. John is ready for anything. He is ready for anything. Food, power, gas, vehicles, you name it. And he is just an awesome, intelligent, feet on the ground kind of guy. Ben knows John. So what am I saying? I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and we talked about how some people seem to overreact in just that they prepare for certain things that have never happened. And I thought, if 2020 hasn't helped us kick that out the window, at least somewhat. Now, you guys have heard me on here before. I'm not talking fear. I'm not saying let's embrace fear. I do not go about my day in 2020 in fear. We do what we have to do, but I'm not getting under that, and I'm certainly not encouraging anybody else to do the same. That said, the idea that things in our lifetime could happen that we didn't think would ever happen. Mm-hmm. It is something that we can think about in this time. And again, not because we're afraid, but because we're able to take the knowledge that Ben's giving us, take the knowledge that you are hungry to learn about, and go, what are some of the things that I think would be most healthy for me to do with this information? So that said, I think that's really good information, and it's certainly a time to think about that. So, Ben, we've got a couple questions here. We're going to start wrapping up, but I think we got some good ones here, so this will be a great spot for us to go. Bev is saying, do you think we'll ever go back to gold-backed money, a gold-backed money system instead of fiat currency?
That's a good question, Bev, and I get that question pretty often. I will say there are some proponents of gold that believe that there's a chance we could. In fact, I actually have read some interesting articles on how exactly that could happen. It would be a lot different than in times past. But if you're asking for my personal opinion, I don't think we ever will. And the reason is because it would take too much power away from the central banks around the world. The fact that the central banks have control of the money supply. Sorry, my kids are back here laughing. Hope that's not too distracting for you guys. But the central banks have so much power, being able to control the money supply and being able to enact things like quantitative easing to, help the economy, in the different various tools they have at their disposal. By going back to a gold standard, that would put, not to overcomplicate things, but it would put a slight deflationary bias on the entire economic system, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. What that means, again, is that the money supply can't outpace the gold that's backing it, but that's what gives money value. But again, I don't think we'll ever be on that on a gold standard again, because it would take too much power away from the central banks that they've had now since 1913, really.
Interesting.
Especially
Yes.
since the 70s.
Wow. Okay. I love that. You guys can tell, there's a whole, what we're doing here today, Ben? We're just opening up another door in the house.
I know, it's crazy.
I'm thinking of the old Batman movie, Bruce Wayne, and he's saying, you know what? I don't think I've ever been in this house or in this room before. This house is so big. He's never even been in that room. I think for some of us, we're just peeking into a room where, I didn't even know this room was here. So while we aren't necessarily going to be able to look at everything in the room today, I hope that this is sparking an interest for you guys to say, I don't know enough about this. I don't know as much about this as I would like to know. This is something that actually could be really beneficial for me, and this is a good introduction to that. That said, we've got one more question on here.
Sure.
Ileana is saying, if you purchase gold and physically have multiple bars, how would one store them? And is that insurable? Interesting questions. Good questions.
Absolutely. Honestly, Indel, it's a lot of, I touch on that a lot within the precious metals education itself. So it would take me too long to go through all of your options, but I'll just leave it at this. You do have multiple options that you can learn about through our precious metals education, including how to, ways to safely store at home, ways to pick, private depositories and things like that out there if you do want even more security than that. And also the things to avoid, the places where you absolutely do not want to have it stored. Okay, so we cover those kinds of things. And I'll say this for anybody out there listening, you can always reach out to me directly. Email preciousmetals@tradeway.com, and that comes to our precious metals division there at Tradeway, but also directly to me. And there are some questions I'm more than happy to lay out there for you. And if it's something that we have to hold specifically for the education itself, I'll share with you ways to be introduced to that. I actually have some free educational materials that I share with people all the time. So if you're interested in getting some of that stuff, shoot me an email and I'll let you know how to get it. So that's a great question, though. There are ways to safely store at home. It's just a matter of knowing what your options are, and just learning how to do it properly.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think that's a great spot to land for us today for everybody out there. Ben's mentioned a few times we do something that other people do, in that you can learn to purchase precious metals. But a couple things I would add is he said we do it differently. Ben not only will help you through this process, but all of this knowledge, all of the understanding of why you would do this, why this would benefit you, how this can benefit, when's a good time, when's not a good time. Those are the kinds of things that I've seen Ben be invested in for our people. So this is not simply about getting you to jump into precious metals, but understand the what, the why, and the how. Mario has a question here just saying, do we physically attain and possess the metals? You can, and Ben is going to go into that in his course. And actually, if I understand this correctly, TRADEway will ultimately help people in the process of purchasing any gold and silver that they would like. And ultimately, we don't actually charge for the premium on any gold or silver. Is that correct, Ben?
That's right, Blair. I do it all the time. With my students, as well as just people part of the TRADEway family that are interested in investing. I walk them through how to choose what's right for them, because there are hundreds of options out there, guys. I walk them through how to know what's right for them so that they're getting the most metal for their dollar and they're achieving their objectives. And I also walk them through the process in many cases so that, when it comes to hitting the buy button, it's not too much of a nervous event there. And we don't make, as of right now, we are not affiliated with any other dealers out there. And so it's, I'm not going to make a commission by helping you walk through an investment. I'm literally doing it for the benefit of our students, and so that you can ensure that you can be confident about that investment, and that, like I said, it ultimately will achieve the objectives that you have. And listen, Blair, I see some fantastic questions coming in the chat. I'll just encourage you guys, since I know we don't have time to cover all of them tonight, send me an email at preciousmetals@tradeway.com, and I'm more than happy to answer these kind of questions I see coming in. And it's what I do every day, Blair, and I absolutely love doing it.
And I think it's contagious. It shows. I think this is just one facet of Ben Mitchell, everybody. We brought this to the forefront today because we felt like this was going to be something that would help you the most. Again, opening that door, probably for most of us, to a brand new room, but something that I think could really help serve you in knowledge at the very least, but in function at the right time, the right place in your life, in your family. And Ben, Ben is this kind of guy, everybody, in every area of his life. He's a deep guy. He goes deep. And I think he's the kind of guy you'd want in your corner. I am right now placing in the chat the email that Ben has mentioned a few times that you can reach out to him. He has a whole course on this stuff. Anything worth really, anyone worth listening to knows enough about something where they can't boil it down into simple answers on a 45-minute broadcast. However, we can give you enough to know, what are we talking about? How does it benefit you? How do I get involved? I think we've done that today, Ben. So I appreciate you being on here, and we're going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you to Ben. Thank you to all you guys out there who joined us today, everybody watching on the recording. Hey, if this is something you think somebody else needs to hear, could benefit from hearing, go ahead, share it, like it, send the link on over to somebody else. It may be the thing that they need to hear right now. We will be back, as always, on Wednesday at this time, right here on the platform you are on right now. Back again next week, Market Monday, with a new person in the hot seat.
Nice.
So that we can. All right. What's that?
It's been an absolute blast, Blair. Thank you so much for having me, and for you guys out there listening. It's been a lot of fun. I want to do it again one of these days.
Of course. Well, we'd be happy to have you back, Ben. Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody, for being on here. And we will see you next time.